From the city of broad shoulders, this is Chicago Unscripted. Your host, CBS News Chicago's Joe Donlan. It's kind of a big deal. Not a Bill Curtis kind of big deal, but who's counting?
Scott Simon is something of a national treasure. That's just my opinion, but I'm certainly not alone. He's been with NPR for more than 40 years, hosting Weekend Edition Saturday, which the Washington Post called the most literate, witty, moving, and just plain interesting news show on any dial. Another review called it the most eclectic, intelligent 2 hours of broadcasting on the airwaves. He's also from Chicago and proudly claims he bleeds Cubs blue, which makes sense considering legendary broadcaster Jack Brickhouse was his godfather. You can hear it in his unmistakable voice, cadence, and delivery. He's a super smart, talented, and gifted writer. He's reported from all 50 states, 5 continents, and 10 wars. We talk about the situation in Venezuela, the impact of AI, the Trump administration cutting off funding for public broadcasting, and the current state and the future of journalism in general. Along the way, we also get into his Chicago roots, the Cubs, a joke he made in passing that actually happened with the new pope. And I never would have guessed this, but I taught Scott something he didn't know, and he got quite a kick out of it. A connection between a former FCC chairman and, of all things, the TV show Gilligan's Island. There's also the poignant and powerful book he wrote about his mother, the final days they spent together before her death in the city they love, and the lessons we can all learn from his mom about getting the most out of our time on Earth. When I reached out, Scott quickly replied he was in, and he added, "I am sure history will eventually certify that God handed down the 10 Commandments to Moses at the corner of State and Randolph." Doesn't get much more Chicago than that. Here's Scott Simon. Greetings from Chicago, Scott. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing well. We have a lot to talk about here.
Where are you in Chicago, may I ask? I have the advantage of being able to look out at your shoulder over, I'm going to guess, I don't know, Delaware?
You're close. Yeah, you're very close. It's funny. This has become a thing with guests now. They all try to guess the buildings behind me and where I am. But it is meaningful to you and more to me now, having read your book, Unforgettable, because you talk about a lot of situations in your life that center around this 2 or 3 block area. And that's why it was so personal to me as well.
Oh, my gosh. So where my mother's last apartment was, it's where the hospital is, where, my mother died.
Mm-hmm.
I could go on.
Well, you wheeled her across the street, right, to the park right behind the MCA.
Exactly. The Eli Shulman Park, as a matter of fact. Yeah. And so many wonderful memories and experiences when we're back as far as that goes.
Yeah. Well, I do want to talk about the book and your mom because it really did have an impact on me for a number of reasons, and we'll get there. But I know you're just back from Madrid and the Future Trends Forum. Why do you enjoy going to this, and what was your big takeaway this year?
Well, I always learn something. I always learn a lot of things. Twice a year, a group of, if I may, on a podcast, pompous asses from all over the world, we get together, and we're able to get a lot of people who know stuff that we don't, and sometimes some things that some of us know, and talk about the most important issues, facing civilization. And sometimes they are obvious, like concerns about the climate, and then sometimes they're not so obvious. And what I learned this time was about microelectric circuitry. And boy, it just had not occurred to me how important this is going to be. And that's in part one problem. One challenge, I should say, leads to the other. With the increased use of artificial intelligence, the increased use of data farms, that's going to create a terrific increase in the demand for energy. Right. And that, of course, comes at a cost. And there is no particular one source of energy that's going to be able to supply all of it. And, of course, when you talk about other different supplies of energy, it comes from places all over the world. Yes, solar, perhaps not wind so much, but also obviously nuclear fission, and minerals. And this is just even as we speak now. That obviously is being raised in questions about U.S. foreign policy interests overseas.
Right.
So it was really eye-opening for me. Plus, forgive me for descending to this level, Joe. You can't have a meaningful discussion about the future unless you're well nourished. And Madrid's a wonderful place for that. Just thought I'd mention that.
Okay, yeah. Haven't been to Madrid, been to Barcelona and loved it. But on that note, do you think the general population, Scott, is aware of just how much AI is going to change the world?
I wasn't until it was unveiled to me. I guess it's been a couple of years ago at the Future Trends Forum. I think we're beginning to recognize ways in which we use it every day that we don't know are applicable to artificial intelligence. You know, the fact that somebody can look you up and artificial intelligence makes the initial editorial judgment on you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Of what people see when it shows up online. And, you know, I happened to last week have laryngitis, which, by the way, my family has never looked more refreshed. They thought this was the best way to
finally silence you.
They thought they walked around with, absolute glow on on all of their faces. But in any event, I became aware of the fact that when I, looked it up, what's causing it, what are my symptoms, I was consulting artificial intelligence.
I know. Our kids, I hear them talking to ChatGPT all the time. I guess I wonder, bigger picture, how it's going to impact jobs. And, you hear so much about how it's going to eliminate so much of what we do.
Well, I think that unfortunately is true, and that could apply to those of us who are in journalism as far as that goes. Joe, I don't rule out that they could, they're inventing AI actors. Mm-hmm. I don't rule out that there could be AI anchors.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That please a lot of people. What can I tell you?
Well,
but I mean the nitty gritty details of reporting, which of course I like to think really do require human ingenuity and human enterprise and human experience. I think a lot of people are going to be satisfied with AI. I mean, and this is something that concerns me now, obviously, with the disappearance of local news. For that matter, I don't know how many news organizations, God bless, in Chicago are regularly covering the criminal courts, are regularly covering, city council subcommittee meetings.
Right.
And AI will fill some of that gap or not. And I worry about it anytime knowledge becomes so concentrated. There's obviously only one point of view that can get out.
Right. Well, let's hope the value of the human touch endures. Let's jump into the news for a minute, Scott, and Venezuela. It's hard to understate the magnitude of what we just did. The question is, for many, I guess, why did we do it, and why now?
Well, I mean, we're left with the statements of the Trump administration. I'm not sure they've said why now. They said that it was done. The Delta Force was sent because there was a criminal warrant out for Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela. They saw an opportunity to bring him back to a stand trial in the United States, and they took it. Why now? I mean, that's when you get into speculation, including obviously speculation. I've heard that this can be a distraction from other things.
Right. We've all seen Wag the Dog.
Yeah, right, exactly. And so I don't know the answer to that. There may not be a satisfying answer to that. I've also seen, of course, that it was the Instagram of Nicolas Maduro dancing that set off the particular call that it be done now. I don't know the answer to that. I read a piece today as we speak by William Hague, former leader of the Conservative Party in Britain, who was foreign minister under conservative governments there, who was very admiring of the efficacy of the Delta Force operation. Mm-hmm. But he said he is concerned that this might breed a kind of hubris. in the United States. And in obviously the administration we have now right at the moment, that might feel that they can change regimes without remorse or without contradiction. And it does help that the Maduro regime obviously has been its legitimacy has been questioned with and of course its human rights record is appalling. Mm-hmm. I am just out of an editorial meeting where several people pointed out that, interestingly enough, human rights were not cited as a reason for the intervention.
Yeah, it was the drugs, right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
The drug case, and I guess the oil, which we've heard about.
And drugs and oil. So I haven't heard it cited, and I'm also. This is something that we'll have to figure out, but I mean, I thought talk about Greenland was kind of fanciful. Mm-hmm. It may not be anymore.
Right.
So I don't have to tell you, Joe, we live in extraordinary times and we have to be light-footed to cover it all.
Yeah, there's no question. Where do you think this goes from here, Scott? Does the Vice President Rodriguez take over, as appears to be the case now? And what happens with the opposition leader, Machado? Do you think there'll be new elections? There are people who are celebrating this.
There are people who are celebrating now, and I would like to think that popular will would be able to provide for new elections in a short period of time. Something like 90 days is what I've read, and I'm in no position to, the fact is you have 8 million Venezuelans who've left the country, right, who are not necessarily in a position to come back and to be able to vote the way they would want to on the future of the country. And, this is something years ago when I covered the war in El Salvador. This is one thing that I became aware of. So many Salvadorans left the country so that by the time they got to what you could call free and fair elections, a lot of people who had been kind of the bulwark of democratic expectations had left the country to come mostly to the United States.
Right.
And they weren't there to participate anymore in the democratic life of their country. Something like that might similarly happen in Venezuela. I think we should also not forget that, not that I obviously know all that went into the Delta Force operation, but I think I can say, based on my years as a reporter, that there obviously was support from the inside, that there were people inside the Maduro leadership, inside the Maduro organization who provided information and understandably will have to be compensated one way or another and might see themselves as in a better off position right now. And that's just, I guess, the cold hard facts of it.
Well, we did a story yesterday just on the immigration situation you touched on. And thousands of Venezuelans have come here to Chicago claiming asylum. And many of them now are worried that they'll be sent back and that this will be used as a reason to deny their asylum because Maduro isn't there anymore.
I think that's a very good precaution and a very good caution. And I take a look for something like that to break each and every day. I mean, this gets to be a small world story, but isn't. My father and I lived in a place that was called the St. Clair Hotel.
Oh, sure.
And a couple of years ago, when my wife and I were back in Chicago, we were passing the St. Clair, which I had pointed out to her. It's where my father died, as a matter of fact. And we noticed that it had become housing for Venezuelan migrants. So I, of course, went back there with audio equipment, and it was run by a city agency at that point, so I couldn't go in freely. I wanted to go up to the room where my father and I had lived and see who's there now. The best they could do was call up, and they found someone on the 12th floor. But I was very moved to talk to Venezuelan migrants who were living where my father and I had lived, and at the same time, they were concerned, how long is this going to last? They were taking fill-in jobs. They didn't feel like they were a permanent part of the economy. And yet, when you spend 9 months, a year somewhere, where do you see your future? And I think that's going to be a very good question for 8 million Venezuelans. And I could understand why many of them are now concerned that they're going to be perhaps precipitously set back.
So just one more note on this. Do you think there will be new elections in Venezuela?
I think when I say I think there will have to be new elections, because the United States has decried, and not just the United States, the United Nations, the world community, not a phrase I like to use, has decried the legality of the previous elections. I think they have to have new elections. It's my understanding the Venezuelan Constitution even calls for it. All that being said, I wouldn't have told you that this operation would have happened. So I should be, I obviously should be very reluctant to venture any certitudes. But it's a good question because I think the elections might happen before the 8 million Venezuelans who voted with their feet will have a chance to vote any other way.
Right. I'd love to hear your thoughts, Scott, on the president's assault on NPR. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting just voted itself out of existence, essentially. What has been, from a direct standpoint with you, the result of this loss of funding that maybe people aren't seeing like you are in the thick of it?
Well, a number of local stations have already had to lay off personnel and cancel programs. That has not happened so far at NPR, but what do we say in this business? Time will tell. The fact is, private fundraising has never been higher. And so the immediate financial crunch that I think perhaps some people wanted to achieve by pulling the rug out from public broadcasting was not there. I mean, the fact is, you probably read a relatively small proportion of NPR's budget came directly from federal sources.
Right.
In any case. So private fundraising is up in part, I imagine, in response to what's happened, and a feeling that we have to rally behind. After all, a service, a broadcaster that has about 44 million listeners a week, and Joe, we should be able to form a pretty good organization out of that. I'm heartened at the fact that fundraising is up, but I have covered many crises over the years, and I realize that's not a long-range business plan. You can do that for a year or two, but you have to have something in place that obviously turns up income.
Is it possible that it comes back with a future administration?
I don't think so. No, I've thought about that. I don't see anybody running for president saying, and I will restore public broadcasting funds that way. I mean, maybe marginal ones, but I mean, I think you have to be realistic. Look at SNAP payments that have been ended. So many other federal programs that have been ended. I think there's going to be more of understandably, there's going to be more public sentiment for bringing that back. And as I said, look, we have an audience right now of 44 million people. I think we should be able to figure out a way to stand on our own.
Yeah. The president said any Republican that votes to allow this monstrosity to continue broadcasting will not have my support or endorsement. Mike Johnson said they're not objective, they pretend to be so. What does it mean to you to hear that?
All I can say is we really try to be objective. And I, every now and then, of course, you say, well, what do you mean? What do you mean exactly? And I find what they bring up to be very unconvincing, which is not to say we don't make mistakes and haven't made mistakes over the years, but I think every news organization does. I don't think they've been made across an ideological line. And I am in those editorial meetings where I think anybody ought to be permitted to, you know what kind of business this is. We have atrocious senses of humor, Joe, don't we? And you can hear that in editorial meetings. But I think when it comes to making editorial decisions, there has always been an absolutely scrupulous intent to try to be fair,
right,
to each and every viewpoint and each and every vantage. What I do, among many other things, regret about the animosity that NPR and public broadcasting has received from this administration is that it's been very difficult to book guests from this administration or from the Republican leadership in Congress, and I think that's a loss. I think that's a loss for our listeners who would like to hear those voices. I think it's a loss for, forgive the expression, democracy, because I think those voices ought to make themselves available to questioning.
Right.
And I think not where they see where they want to be heard, and I regret that.
Well, I've talked with other guests on the podcast here, but about this. But former FCC Chairman Newt Minow once told me, reporters should be skeptical, not cynical. And I think it's fair to say there's really very little place even for skepticism today. It's complete deference or it's fake news.
Yeah, I think that's right. Newt Minow, by the way, was the first person I ever interviewed for NPR.
Is that right?
He was chairman of the he was chairman of the national commission that established debates.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And so I interviewed him about that. What are the debates going to be like? And we became friendly over the years with his family. It's
great guy. We're sorry to see his passing, but he, of course, famously called TV a vast
wasteland.
That's
yes,
right.
Indeed, absolutely, yeah.
And I don't know if people realize, but that's what the ship in Gilligan's Island, who it was named after, Newt Minow, the SS Minnow.
The SS Minnow? I had no idea.
Yeah.
Really?
Wow. Okay.
The minnow would be lost.
Yep.
The minnow would be lost.
That's the headline
hilarious.
of the podcast, Scott. I just told Scott Simon something he didn't know. I would have never guessed that in a million years.
That's amazing. That changes my whole viewpoint. I had no idea that until this moment that Gilligan's Island was such a pointed and thoughtful reflection on American society and politics at that moment. That's absolutely it. I just thought it was, Gilligan and the captain and, the Professor and Marianne.
Here on Gilligan's Island, yeah. So, no, he still has had the life preserver from the SS Minnow in his office. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, I didn't know that. That's
well, let me just say then about the broader subject then, the assault on journalism in general. Are you worried about where we are right now in the journalism landscape?
Yeah, sure. Because I think for a great many Americans, journalism is DIY. We're in a podcast. you and I can see each other. I'm going to hold up my phone,
That's it.
We know you can get a lot of news from there and you can get it in an indiscriminate way. And look, there are good things about this. Obviously, it was 10 years ago when there were mass demonstrations in Iran. We were able to hear from some people there directly because of the phone. The trade-off of that is obviously you don't know about the veracity of what you're getting, and I think what you're getting is often partisan and pointed. But it's a source of information, and obviously there's no going back. I am concerned that people will find the scrupulousness of the news industry, the fact that we, as a generalization, do try and be fair and do try and present all viewpoints. I think sometimes people don't want that. They want They just want to be ratified in their own viewpoint, and they'll find something that does that. And I'm concerned about that immediately, and I'm concerned about it long range. Because if we're gonna survive as a country where we vote and elect leaders and they enact legislation, we have to be open to hearing all sides and to I have covered so many foreign policy stories over the years. And societies overseas where they have one election and that's it.
Yeah.
A new group comes into power and they have one election that ratifies the hold that they have on power, and then that's the end of elections. And I don't think that's about to happen in this country, but I do worry that people feel that once they get a hold on power, the whole idea is just snuff out anybody else.
Right. How do you think we got to this point, Scott? This is something I've struggled with, the anger, the outrage, the division.
I have wondered about that over and over, Joe, and I guess I'm just at a loss. I'm among those who would have told you that's not the United States. That can't happen. And for that matter, it's not just the United States. As you may know, my wife is French. We spend a few weeks there every year, and very happily so. I love France. they're putting up with many of the same issues at this particular point about public anger and the ferocity of public opinion. And I forget exactly what government they're on at this particular point. They haven't been able to find one because haven't been able to come together. And I guess this all suggests a skepticism and a distrust of institutions, and people who stand up and rail against them, even if they don't necessarily have any creative suggestions, constructive suggestions as to how we get better, can attract attention that way and can feed and fuel anger. And look, I remember when what I'll refer to as internet culture began to come in, and the good part of it is, we can hear from people all over the world. You can be the Pope, and you can hear firsthand from someone who lives in a basti in Calcutta.
Mm-hmm.
You can hear their voice. You can, and for that matter, you can talk back and forth. All of that's good. That obviously hasn't been so much how it's been used. And I had an audiobook that came out a couple of years ago. Swing Time for Hitler, it's called. And
yes.
It was about propaganda broadcasts beginning in World War II. And of course, there are some Chicago connections. But it struck me that the particular business we're in, broadcasting, beginning with radio, began with similar hopes and dreams back in the 20s. People all over the world can hear each other. People can hear each other's voices. We can reach out. London will no longer be closed off from New York. People in Iowa can hear voices coming from Hollywood, for that matter. People out, all of that was very hopeful. But it has reminded me, and this gets back to AI, when a new technology makes itself available and it affects all of society, it's not always the people with the best intentions who act the quickest.
Mm. All right.
Thanks. Does that pick up your?
Yeah, that's thanks for the pick me up.
That's all right.
All right,
let's sing the theme to Gilligan's Island again. I want to tell everybody. I had no idea.
I am so glad that I could impart that little nugget on you. But let's shift to Chicago, Scott, because that's obviously a big part of your life, a big part of all the books you've written. And this might take you an hour to answer, but what does it mean to you to be from Chicago?
I think Chicago is the greatest city in the world. Objectively. And by the way, it absolutely amuses me that our daughters will refer to themselves as being from a Chicago French family, because the Chicago tag is so deep.
Sure.
They know it's American, but it's Chicago. And I think certainly in our line of, there's no better place to be a journalist than Chicago. Because people come there from all over the world to make a mark, to live their lives. You learn about the world. It changes from block to block.
Yeah.
It has a vivacity. It has a charm. It obviously can be challenging. It can be taxing. And you and I are speaking in January. What's the temperature there?
It's actually pretty nice.
Oh, okay.
It's in the 40s, and we might even hit 50 on Thursday. So.
Oh my gosh! All
Yeah.
right, I picked the wrong week for that. But in any event, I think in my novel Windy City, I talk about much of it is set in January and February in Chicago, and I have an aside in there where I say every Chicagoan at one point in January or February just stops in the middle of the street and goes, "Okay, I've had it. I give up. Enough."
Yeah.
You can
We've
hear
all
it.
been. Yeah, the dog even agrees with that.
Yeah, that's right. Our French poodle. But I think it's the world writ small in a way that's happy. I remember years ago, it was a sad story. There was a bombing of a storefront on the northwest side of a Serbian nationalist group that was also kind of a local hangout and bar. It was bombed overnight. Everybody was gone. So there were no human casualties, but there was obviously a lot of destruction. And I looked up and I saw the pictures of all these Serbian and Croatian and Bosnian national leaders, and I thought, what are they mad about? What is this ancient war? And of course, a few years later, I was covering that war.
Yeah.
It was no longer so ancient.
Sure. Yeah.
In the siege of Sarajevo. So I just think there's a little bit, and sometimes more than a little bit, of everything in the world in Chicago. And you go from block to block, and wherever you are in the world, you'll find a place where they speak your language, they know your foods. I think it's amazing.
Yeah. I'll never forget, one of our kids said to me, Dad, it's scary how much you love this city.
No.
And it's true.
Yeah.
I know, and I know I said to your rep, Kathy, that my kids will probably have a hard time believing there's someone who loves this city more than I do, but that's you for sure. I mean,
oh boy,
you just look at the books, and let's talk about one of them, the Cubs.
Can I say one more thing about being
Sure.
from Chicago? So the Pope, right? There was the
Right.
papal conclave.
Uh-huh.
And in any event, I said to my wife that I was on a Sunday afternoon, that the white smoke hadn't come out.
Yeah.
But I said something like, I'm going to take a nap. And she said, should I wake you if there's a new pope? And I said, only if he's from Chicago.
Are you serious?
Absolutely.
Wow.
And like 20 minutes later, my wife, Dunning, the new pope is from Chicago.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And there's an old, I've started using this, there's an old joke. I'll have to be careful even on this podcast. You ask somebody an obvious question and they reply, it used to be, does a bear defecate in the woods? And then sometimes it was, well, is the Pope Catholic,
right.
And then, so that became, when they started having popes from outside of Italy, I would say, well, is the Pope Polish? Is the John Polish? And so now when people say, well, should we do this? I'll go, hey, is the Pope from Chicago? Like it's the most obvious thing in the world.
Well, did it disappoint you, though, that he's a Sox fan? Because your book, My Cubs, A Love Story.
Yeah, I like to think that in his wide-ranging, infinite worldly wisdom, Pope Leo will find room in his heart for the Cubs as well. That's and it is lost on me that we get a Pope from Chicago, and the Bears have the really enchanted season that they've been having.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten it yet, but a few years ago, we were at a wedding, one of these destination weddings in Italy, and I got one of the greatest souvenirs of all time at an Italian truck stop, which, by the way, Joe, Italian truck stops, they're great. I mean, they're just great. So I got a bobblehead doll of Pope Francis, which I keep in my NPR office.
Okay.
For the holidays this year, it hasn't been delivered yet. My family got me a bobblehead doll of Pope Leo.
Oh.
And apparently he has a White Sox hat on.
I was just going to ask. It probably does. All right. Well, tell me a story about where this love affair with the Cubs came from. And tell me a story maybe about Wrigley or something that cemented your fandom.
It used to be at Senn High School on the north side of Chicago. Or by the way, I mean, we could win, during baseball season, April, May, first few days of June, and then later in the fall, when the classroom windows would be open, and when there was that rare occasion in those days of a home run from Wrigley Field, we could hear the cheers coming in. And when I would take the L home from Thorndale, obviously it would stop at Addison. And that's when you would see the W or the L signs up.
Right.
It was just a part of our lives. And it, by the way, it used to be perfectly, I don't want to get anybody I went to high school with in trouble, but it used to be perfectly acceptable at Senn High School to miss a day to go to the ball game.
Oh, really?
If you came into class, where were you yesterday, Simon? I saw the game against the Pirates. Okay.
Right. That's an excused absence.
Yeah, it used to be perfectly acceptable, and it's just part of being a Chicagoan. A North Sider, and and I was lucky enough. My godfather, the late Jack Brickhouse, was the Chicago Cubs announcer. He was also the White Sox announcer in those days. So as a kid, I used to go with my father and, and Uncle Jack
Wow.
to Wrigley Field. And, it just became an extension, of home in many ways to us. I'm not going to give anything away, but all right, my Auntie Marion married Charlie Grimm, who had been the Cub first baseman and was their manager for a couple of years. And in that famous Norman Rockwell picture called The Dugout, which shows a group of people, Cubs, sitting on and looking so embarrassed because something's happened on the field that embarrasses them. Uncle Charlie is portrayed there as the manager. He always used to complain that Rockwell made him look like a basset hound. In any event, when he died a number of years ago, Auntie Marion called up an executive, the Tribune Corporation, then owned the Cubs, and said, Mr. Wrigley always told Charlie when he died, his ashes would be buried at Wrigley Field. And the executive said, "Oh, Marion, we can't do that." And then every jerk and the blah, blah, blah. And he said, we've got players with religious background, and the last thing they want to do is have to slip and slide around a crematorium,
Right.
In any event, she said, "You couldn't get away with this nowadays." "Oh, really? Well, I just think I'm going to call our friends at the Sun-Times and tell them what the Tribune." So I got a phone call one morning. Auntie Marion said, "Come to Wrigley Field." I think it was 10:30. This was in March, so the Cubs were at spring training in Arizona. And there was a Catholic priest, and Uncle Charlie's remains were sprinkled up and down the first base line.
Wow.
And in any event, so in our family to this day, whenever there's a close play at first, there's a pitcher has to try and keep someone in check at first, or something like that, and a player slides and wipes off his backside, we say, "Oh, he's got an ass full of Uncle Charlie." And Uncle Charlie was designated by the team to welcome Leo DeRocher when he came to manage the Cubs, because they played against each other. He was absolutely a great guy. He was wonderful. So that made me feel closer to the club, And look, I bleed Chicago Cub blue at this particular point.
Well, I had NBC's Willie Geist on the podcast a little while ago, and his dad, Bill, worked for the Trib for years. And Willie told me his dad wouldn't let him be a Cubs fan because he said they were so bad it constituted child abuse.
Oh, I know, I've heard that. I remember my wife and I had been married just a couple of years when, what can I tell you? That terrible thing happened. What can I tell you? Remember the missed ball of the Cubs didn't get to the World Series.
Oh, yeah.
And in any event, I remember because my wife and I were seeing that at a bar, I'm afraid in Georgetown in Washington, D.C. And she worried about my reaction. And I said something like, "Oh, they can come back tomorrow. It'll be, obviously that didn't happen."
Right.
And she actually caught me in our bathroom crying that night, saying, I really thought that we had a chance. And so a couple of days later, we're standing in the kitchen. Remember, my wife is French. And she's reading something in the newspaper about, I think Kenny Williams was then the general manager of the White Sox.
Sure.
And he said, he was quoted as saying something like, we didn't like the year that we had, and we're going to make some changes. And she said, "Darling, this is what you do when you do it for a living. Look, Cubs fans are all saying, well, these things happen. Oh, well, we'll get them next time. Next year, better year." Whereas the White Sox are saying, we're going to change things. We're going to get better. And then she looked at me, and her eyes shining, and she said, "Darling, shouldn't our daughters be White Sox fans?"
Well, you were having none of that, I'm sure.
It would have been, and we were very happy. I remember watching when they won in 2005.
Sure.
But nothing obviously competes with that 2016 World Series. Yeah.
All right. I know we're up against the clock here, Scott, so I'm going to let you go. But before I do want to talk to you about the book, Unforgettable. I
Yeah.
just wrapped it up, and I know it's been 10 years now, but
Yeah.
you were at your mom's side as she spent her final days on Earth. It's such a beautiful tribute to a life well lived. And I think
Yeah.
my takeaway among many was that I felt like I had met a new friend in your mom after reading it.
Well, she would feel wonderful about that. I like to think you have. I think she stays with people that way. It was, I mean, every book is difficult, but this was obviously a difficult book to do for many reasons.
Sure.
And Twitter, as it was called then, not X, was in its infancy, and I had an active Twitter account, and I just began. She was just so funny and so bright and so wise in what she was saying. It must be said, my wife and children and I were out in California, and she was going to join us there, and it was going to be the first time since we'd been married both mothers-in-law would be together, which is something we were looking forward to. She couldn't join us. She got sick. I wound up flying to Chicago and wound up staying in the intensive care unit room with her. And I just found what she was saying was so funny and so pointed. And so, I mean, she said to me at one point, she was, I believe, 84. She said, you know, baby, you should spend more time talking to people in their 80s because they have looked right across the street at death for more than a decade, and they know what's important in life. She's also very funny when we both knew that the end was nigh. She said to me at one point, I don't know why this is taking so long. I guess I'm just late for everything. And I just found her so entertaining. I passed this along. Yeah. And that's where the interest in the book was. And it was good to, you know, the time we spent was obviously immeasurable and irreplaceable.
Yeah. And what a treasure to have that opportunity, because I didn't with either of my parents.
Yeah.
I mean, leading up to, but, you know, not the kind of conversations you had at your mother's bedside. But I'll leave that for people to read because it's really such an amazing story of her life. And I also appreciated so much her just zest for life and how she really didn't care what anyone else thought about it, right? I mean, that's what
absolutely.
I loved it. But there was a part where you write, Scott, death makes life worthwhile.
Yeah.
It frightens and inspires us. Death is what drives us. It's the certainty of death that gets us out of bed. I don't doubt that, but I couldn't help but think when you said that we kind of go through life avoiding even the thought of it. I mean, almost denying that it's inevitable because the finality of it's so mind-boggling and uncertain.
Yep, mind-boggling and uncertain. I mean, we a couple of years ago, my wife and I were at the inevitable Georgetown dinner party, and there was a distinguished man who'd been in government who was in his 80s. He said, you know, realistically, I know I don't have much time left, but I keep saying to myself, well, surely there's got to be at least one exception. Which I was able to say, well, I think there was the one exception, depending on your religious point of view, and that's, you know, that's it.
Right.
But no, and we don't talk about it, and I guess maybe we don't need to, but it did underscore for me my experience with my mother. The fact that we know that we don't have all the time in the world should make us treasure the time that is in front of us and not waste it, not misuse it, not spend it in having small-minded resentments, but to be open-hearted about it as we can as we go through life, realizing that, and look, it's I am of an age where it's not uncommon for me to lose friends, and it's maybe a little bit early at this particular point, but not really, and that's rough, and you carry a part of them as you go along.
Right.
But I think it also underscores the fact that each and every day we get is a blessing. And it's there to be used, and it's there to be enjoyed, and to have that blessing bestowed on others.
Well, I'm just a couple years behind you, but I think my parents' death hit me in a way that I hadn't really started thinking about these very things.
Yeah.
But, you
my father died when I was 16, so that's
right.
sort of, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I think what brought it to light for me was my wife said to me, "Hey, our youngest is worried about you." And this was after my dad had died.
Oh,
She was
God
worried
bless.
about you, and I said,
Yeah.
"Well, no, I'm okay. He was 87. He lived a great life." And she said, "No, you don't understand. She's worried about you." And I thought, "Oh, wow." And you do write in the book that a passing like this makes us realize we're next. You know, it resets the clock we keep on our own lives, you say.
Absolutely the case. And I've had that same conversation with our daughters. They know we're next. I'm next. Many years ahead of my wife, I'm sure, but in any event, and they have told me that there are things they want to make certain I'm around to see.
Yeah. All right, one last question, and then we'll let you go. If you could get together with anyone in history, dead or alive, over a pint, who would it be?
Dead or alive, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, this is obviously Illinois. I'd have to say Lincoln.
Wow. Okay.
I should explain, on top of everything else, he was supposed to be a great storyteller, right?
Right.
And had a great sense of humor and was a great joke teller. So it wouldn't be as if I'd be saying, "Oh, so Abe, tell me about, why you signed the Emancipation Proclamation, and tell me about the Battle of Antietam." I could ask him to tell me a few funny stories. And,
Sure.
I'll never forget the time. So I think he would be, yeah, all right. I think he would be funny. That would
Boy,
be
that shows your true Chicago, cred right there. I mean, over Churchill, you would sit down with Lincoln.
Well, look, if Churchill showed up and said, "May I join you?" I wouldn't say, "Move along, buddy. What can I tell you?" Churchill would be good too, except it wouldn't stop at a pint.
Right. That's true.
Yeah. And Churchill would have started before us.
Yeah.
So I'd still go with Lincoln, because we share some history. Boy, is that pompous. But I mean, we can. Well, what do you really think of Rantoul? We could have things. Whereas Churchill would go, Rantoul, but Churchill maybe a second, yeah.
Listen, Scott, I can't thank you enough for the time. It's been a pleasure and an honor to chat with you. What a career you've had. What a run it's been. And I will just say, having read the latest Unforgettable, I will walk down Michigan Avenue now, as I do often, and think of you and your mom and your love for this city, which I share.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Joe. It's been a delight to be with you. Thank you.
My thanks to Scott for his insight and candor. I had a lot more to ask him, but we had already blown way past his hard out, so I appreciate the time. Our audio engineer is Brian Griggs from Brian Griggs Productions. The original theme music is provided by Chicago vibraphonist Thaddeus Tukes. Thanks to the legendary voice on the way in each episode, that's Bill Curtis. I'm Joe Donlin. I'll see you on CBS News Chicago. It's available everywhere on the CBS News app. And as always, I thank you for listening to Chicago Unscripted.